Find your future by exploring your world. The Massachusetts School of Law challenges their students to explore the important issues of our time, learning from experts in fields like politics, sports, and business law. From first-hand accounts and dramatic reenactments, in-depth conversations with society's leaders, from historians to lawyers, from high-tech professionals to environmental experts. The Massachusetts School of Law at Andover presents MSLAWTV138.
In the hour that follows, we will talk with Dr. Nick Trout about his life as an animal surgeon and his wonderful new book, Tell Me Where It Hurts. At 2:47 a.m., Dr. Trout received a phone call that starts another hectic day at Angel Animal Medical Center. His book, Tell Me Where It Hurts, takes us with him for the next 24 hours. As he fights for Sage's life, he handles other tricky diagnoses, and he reassures pet parents. He tells the story with humor, heartache, and inspiration. Dr. Trout, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Diane Sullivan, your host for today's program. Dr. Trout, let's begin our discussion of your book at that 2:47 a.m. wake-up call from Dr. Hartman, who you know his dog is crucial to him. He's lost his wife. He tells you this is all he has. Tell us what that was like.
Well, I think, whenever you receive any call in the middle of the night, your brain is somewhere left on the pillow and you've got to try and play catch up. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take too long before, when you meet with an owner, when you speak to an owner, that you sense the motivation, the reason that you are there. That, I may be dealing with an animal, but this is a love triangle. There is a triangular relationship here between owner and animal, between animal and vet, mm-hmm. between vet and owner, and it has to sort of come together. And I think when you are lucky to share in this, see this relationship and see the intensity of the bond that exists and the importance of that bond, it weighs heavy on you, and it can be a huge motivational factor to say, time to wake up here and mm-hmm. let's get busy. Mm-hmm. So,
how does the suffering in Mr. Hartman's eyes impact you personally?
Well, I think you have to strike a balance here, because I think if you become a bumbling wreck, mm-hmm. Because you're so caught up in the intensity of what is happening, the fear of losing this dog for this man, you're not going to be any use to anyone. And so you're trying to keep that knowledge there, but at the same time be, surgically objective, to try to say, I've got to do my best for this animal, and I have to balance that between what I believe to be appropriate and what is, maybe going too far. And that's part of the essence of the book. Right. How far do we go, and when is that the right thing to do? And we like to think that when we go and see a doctor that everything is black and white, and I think one of the things I wanted to convey was this huge gray area, and also that we in the medical profession, in whatever specialty, are human, and we're flawed, and we're fallible, and we make mistakes, but if our intent is still to do the right thing, then we can sleep well at night.
You make it clear to me in your book that your primary obligation is to that suffering animal. Am I right about that?
Yes, I think that has to be, there's going to be owners who are so caught up in their animal's pain, suffering, the loss of that animal, the potential loss of that animal, that they're losing sight of what is a reasonable thing to do, that they may be prepared to go to lengths that are not deemed reasonable, that are verging on, inhumane, or would be just prolonging suffering needlessly. And so I think you do have to say, I'm going to step in here, and that I can, hopefully based on my education experience, try to do the right thing by the animal, and then try to share why I'm doing what I believe to be the right thing with the owner. And in doing so, give them some comfort in what's happening and why we're doing these things. It's really, it's part of my philosophy that actually works nicely in the sense of the book, because I wanted the owner to be with me. when I see a client, I want them to share the experience that I'm going through, the diagnostic dilemma, the uncertainty of what is the right thing to do. These are our options. To take the owner on a ride in the same way as I'm taking the reader on a ride. You know, I wanted to say, come onto this side of the examination table for a while and see what it's like, and see that we're all trying to do the right thing, but it's not that clear-cut, I walk in, you tell me what it is. Sometimes it is, and we get lucky, but a lot of the time we're going to have to try and discover that, and if we're going to do it, let's do it together.
From your perspective, what role do pets play in people's lives?
Just a ridiculously large one these days. I've tried to think about, you know, when this transition took place, and there's no clear line of demarcation, but certainly over the last 20 years, you know, the days where I would have an owner say, my dog lives outside in a kennel, seem to be over. I mean, it just doesn't happen. They are with the family, they are part of the family. And to some owners, a child, to be considered as important as a child in their life. But why that has happened, I'm not sure. I think, you know, one of the things that struck me a couple of years ago was my eldest daughter was at college, just as a freshman starting up college. And I was there helping her settle in, and there was a room full of other students. And I was watching this whole group of freshmen who obviously, they didn't know one another, they were all a little nervous, a little anxious, really needed to sort of get into some social interactions here and talk to one another. And what do? They put the iPods in the ear, they pick up their cell phone, and they start talking. And I'm thinking to myself, is this what is the problem here? Because they can't form easy relationships. Whereas suddenly the animals in our lives, they don't ask questions. They give love and affection. There's no worries about prenups and divorce. You know, this is a relationship that is guaranteed to last. You know, and I write about, you know, this is love without the risk. The downside being that when we embrace these animals in our lives, we know we are doing it for a finite period of time, that unfortunately the lifespan of a cat and dog is so short in relative terms that we are going to have to hold them in our hearts knowing we're going to lose them. And that's a tough part of this whole cycle. I joke about the fact that, you know, with the great care people are taking of their animals now, you know, 15 for dogs is the new 11. You know, and 24 for cats might be the new 15. You know, but if you look really over the last 20 years, the sort of quality of nutritional care, general health care, all the add-ons in the sort of high-tech surgery and medicine that we're now doing, animals are leading these longer, and not just longer lives because we want them around for longer, but healthier lives.
And that is really good news.
Yeah.
I wonder if you'd tell us a little bit about Sage and your treatment of Sage.
Yeah, Sage's story is a dog who has one of those true surgical emergencies, this thing called gastric dilatation or volvulus or bloat. What it basically means is, for some reason, we really don't know exactly why, in deep-chested dogs like German Shepherds, Irish Setters, Standard Poodles, but even in small dogs from time to time, the stomach will inflate and flip, it'll twist. And in doing so, that twist prevents the contents of the stomach to get out. You can't throw up. And so unchecked, this organ is swelling and dilating in the abdomen. It's pushing up on the chest. It's impeding the blood flow back to the heart. And it is potentially fatal within a very short period of time. And it is just one of those few dilemmas that there's not much to think about. We're doing surgery or your dog will die. And so, you know, I chose to talk about this because it pushes me into a situation and pushes owners into a situation where they say, I have to act. There is no middle ground here. you know, the very least I could do would be to say, I cannot afford to go ahead. I do not want to see my animal go through this, and I would put an animal to sleep. And so to me, it was this sort of perfect story to bookend the entire book and fill in along the way, so that you can keep up with this character and the animal and the whole relationship to see how is this going to turn out.
And it really did have me on pins and needles. And I kept saying, well, he's not going to put this in the book if it doesn't have a happy ending. We're not going to open with this and rip my heart out, I hope. I wonder if we could talk for a few minutes about veterinary school. You say there are 28, am I right about that,
Correct,
in the United States?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about who the typical candidate is, if there is such a thing, and what training is like.
It's amazing to me. It's become such a humbling experience to me to see the incredible dedication of people who want to become veterinarians. And I talk about some of the differences between veterinary medicine and veterinary education in the United Kingdom, where I was born and started my education. In that, you know, in the UK, you are basically a 16, 17-year-old kid in high school deciding, I want to be a vet, I'm going to apply to become a veterinarian, go to veterinary school, and be a DVM at 23, 24 years of age, all done. Versus the American system, whereby you would take your undergraduate degree, and at the end of which, with a more mature mind, be able to say, you know, I really want to become a vet, and my GPA is very good. Talking to a graduate who was saying that minimum GPA would be 3.6 to apply to veterinary school, and less than that, you know, that was going to be hard. And I'm thinking, wow, I don't know whether I would have got in, you know. And then not only that, we're looking for, you know, a bright, active mind, someone who is demonstrating a lot of interest in animals, in animal welfare, as a veterinary technician, as a anesthesia technician. I mean, these kids are investing several years to get to a level that they are starting to look like a good candidate. And I think what is good about this is that by the time they go to veterinary school and have that ridiculous price tag on their education and come out with this massive debt, they are, and have already proven, they were hungry enough to want this degree that they don't care about the debt. They're going to, you know, get rid of that through a career that they think is wonderful and valid and justifies why they have gone along this path. One of the things that struck me about veterinarians in the UK, in 2006, the Royal Veterinary College did a survey of UK veterinarians and discovered, it asked the question, if you had this to do over again, would you do it? And 53% of veterinarians in the UK said yes. And when I read that, I said, whoa, that's okay for the yes, but what about the no? Well, it turned out that something like 20% said no and 27% said they were unsure. But that's nearly half the vets said they weren't sure, or worse, that they didn't want to do this over again. And I said, well, why is that? What is so fundamentally different here? Why have they said that I made a mistake? Well, maybe because, you know, with those raging hormones of a teenager, how accurate can your look into the future be? And that you're also probably, you know, maybe you've hung out at a veterinarian's practice, seen a couple of days here and there, but you really haven't lived this life. You're probably indoctrinated by the wonderful stories of James Herriot and believing that modern veterinary medicine can hold that for you. And so I think, you know, when I first came to the United States back in '91, I was thinking, hey, isn't it great being so young and everybody is so much older than me and still receiving their education? But what I've come to believe is that the American system actually filters out for those truly dedicated to become veterinarians and those who will reflect back on life and say, that was the right thing to do. You know, because I mean, these these guys are coming out with $120,000, $200,000 debt. And you've got to feel pretty good about your career choice to take on that burden.
That's right.
And they truly do. And I think, you know, that's wonderful. I wonder if veterinary education costs quite as much in the UK, whether the same would be true. And I also wonder, you know, it'd be interesting to ask the same question, would you do this over again, to the American veterinary population? And my sense would be the vast majority, a much higher majority than 53% would say yes.
Yes, I was curious about that as you were talking about that study. I wonder if you could talk for a little bit about the change for women in veterinary school. I bet 30 years ago there were very few.
No, very few. I can't remember the exact statistics, but I want to say something like in 1968, there was something like 8% of the veterinary student body was female, and now it's over 75%.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, a huge transition. And there's been a lot of dangerous debate as to why that has happened. What was very nice to see was, I think, people said that perhaps low salaries had allowed women to drift into the profession, or that women drifting into the profession had caused a decrease in salary. And it was very clearly proven that was not the case. This gender switch occurred before there was any change in salary. Wow. So we can discard that notion. There's nothing to do with money. It's nothing that there's no way that women have caused this. The decline in salaries was occurring before that.
That's always the argument, you know, the pink collarization of women coming into the profession. And I think it's important to hear that that's not really accurate.
No, and it was, you know, I think it was nice that someone said, well, you know what, I'm going to prove this, and that is not the case. The other thing was, of course, the devaluing of female professions, you know, like nursing, like teaching, you know, that I don't think that's the case. I think probably the most important reason was we went from veterinarians being predominantly involved with large animals to being involved with small animals. And again, it's not due to a woman physically being able to or unable to work with some huge horse or some huge cow. It was that we saw that there was this niche for women developing, in which they were perhaps more compassionate, more able to interact and relate to clients of companion smaller animals. I mean, I talk about the fact that, you know, what is an extra 70 pounds in body weight when you're handling a 1,500-pound animal? It's not going to make any difference. You can do it just as well as if you're male or female, or just as poorly if you're male and female. And so, you know, that development of companion animal veterinary medicine is perhaps where they drifted into. And I think perhaps the other thing that it gave was more flexibility for working women to follow a career.
That's right.
And so, you know, these are, I think, many of the reasons why this has happened. No one knows for sure. The only downside to it is a concern that because women are drawn towards that kind of practice, the cats, the dogs, the exotic animals, that there's a fear about what's going to happen in the world of large animals, farm animals, production animals. And there are attempts to sort of try to encourage more men back into the profession. It's interesting that I've heard, and I've never had this verified, that, you know, that in certain veterinary schools in Europe, there is actually, if you are male, your chances of getting in are slightly more favorable because, and that's probably nothing official there, because they are looking to increase their numbers. Yeah. So it is something that, you know, we're going to see what happens over the next couple of decades. But right now, you know, there are certain universities who feel like it won't be long before we're virtually 100% female. And I've known of classes, I think Tufts one year had something like 93, 94%.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to go into veterinary education if you're a single male.
I guess it is. You know, we've seen in medicine, we've seen in law, classes are now probably a little bit over 50% women, but nowhere near those type of numbers.
Yeah.
From day one, I knew I took the right step.
The Massachusetts School of Law is challenging,
but you feel welcomed and supported at every turn.
You're learning the professional skills you need to get hired.
From professors with real-world experience.
Trust me, that makes a huge difference.
I now have a job I love, and the best part is, I'm not in debt.
No LSATs required. Teachers that make a difference at the most affordable law school in New England, the Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
Some of the stories I enjoyed in your book were the new veterinarians practicing. I particularly liked Whiskey and the new vet named Elliot. I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about your relationship and your guidance with some of the young vets.
Yeah, I think the first thing that strikes you about the new veterinarians who come along is this, you know, to be kind, you sort of have this sense of, my goodness, I have come a long way. and this empathy for what they are going through, this sort of rite of passage. And it's very appealing, you know, it lends itself to comedy and pathos and just this wonderful naivety combined with incredible desire to learn and to do good. Mm-hmm. You know, when you've really spent all this time wanting to become a vet and you finally put on that oversized white coat and wear that stethoscope scarf and step out into that room and the owner looks at you and thinks, I'm not letting this kid touch my dog. You know, they have these wonderful tricks of, you know, saying, oh, I just need to go and get a pair of scissors, while they're actually coming out and saying, hey, I've got this case, can I talk to you about it? You know, and it's very endearing, and you sort of, it feels like, yeah, I remember those days, and let me help you out here. I think the young doctors on staff, they very much keep you on your toes. They're so inquisitive. They also will take the care level to another degree. Mm-hmm. They are absolutely petrified of things going wrong, and that translates into long hours, multiple phone calls to the owner to check in, and they get these, you know, for the first time after all this sort of dry education, they are the recipient of these awards of what a compassionate person you are, what a great job you're doing, thank you for looking after my animal. You know, and that's got to feel good, having suddenly thought, you know, I'm doing something for real now, I'm actually making a difference. And you know, part of it is that you're making a difference in the animal's life, but you're also making a difference in the owner's life. And to some extent, they never realized that there was that feedback as well.
You don't treat people, but you really do, because you treat the animals that we love.
You do, and I think the other thing is, you know, I go over to high schools and talk to the kids, and they, I don't want to deal with people, I want to just deal with animals, and that's just not how it works. You're blessed to be able to work with the animals, but you're working for people, and that, you know, communication is key here, that ability to tell people what's going on, and if that breaks down, you'll be in trouble. And sadly, you know, when I look back, if you look back and say, you know, where are the problem cases, they will be with the young, brand new doctors, because that element of learning about veterinary medicine is new to them. Mm-hmm. You know, they haven't had to develop good communication skills to be clear about what's going on. And they have a hard time because, you know, a lot of owners aren't really respecting exactly what they're saying. It hasn't had a basis on time and experience, and so those things have to come with time. And you know, you can talk to the senior staff, and the complaint letters will be coming in. Once they start, that first couple of months, you know you're going to get inundated with complaint letters. And you know, you can preempt that by saying, you know, if this is coming from a brand new intern, I'm going to get involved in this. I can't just take the case and rely on this person, because what has been said may be based on a textbook memory rather than a real world experience, because they just haven't got it yet.
Right.
And that will change. You know, and again, the other thing that's wonderful is our interns are with us for 13 months, and that naive individual at the beginning, and 13 months later, it's just a different bird. You know, they're so different. So they'll come a long way.
And of course, your hospital provides such a wonderful resource to the community that I'm sure you're inundated with difficult cases there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, by definition, we provide a sort of small first or relatively small first opinion service to the local community, but by far and away it's referral work, and by definition, right. Referral means difficult.
Right.
And difficult cases. Clients who want to take this to the next level, they've already, by showing up, they're saying we're serious about what gets done, and so their demands are different, and they should be. You know, they're looking for state of the art, and that's what we're trying to provide, and also one-stop shopping. You know, one of the nice things about what I do is that, you know, a client will say, oh yeah, can you fix this fracture or this back problem or whatever, and I've got this niggling skin problem with my dog, can you sort that out? You don't want me fixing your dog's skin problem, but hey, you know what, we've got a dermatologist, or we've got a dentist, or we've got a cancer specialist, or we've got a radiologist. So they get this big package, and I just get to send them in the appropriate direction, and everything gets done under one roof.
So as a further follow-up to that, I wonder if you might distinguish a little bit being a veterinarian from being an animal surgeon.
Well, I think, you know, we come out as veterinarians or veterinary surgeons, but to be a surgical specialist, you go through an internship program, a 3-year residency program that requires you to see certain types and variety of cases. It's all mentored. You have to submit papers for publication in peer-reviewed journals, as well as sitting a vigorous examination, and at the end of that you are certified to be a board-certified specialist in surgery. And there are multiple other areas of specialization. So you have gone from being a general practice veterinarian 4 years later to have the potential to become a surgical specialist. That is different from human medicine, in which, you know, you are an MD, and then you go on. Part of your training is to do an internship residency, become boarded.
Right.
That is automatic. About 20% of veterinarians now choose to go on to this extra training, and that is optional. It's not, you know, quotas are to be filled throughout hospitals throughout the country in human medicine. These are going to be cream of the crop. You're going to be filtered off. You're going to be selected from all those people who want to become interns or residents in their different areas. And so, you know, there may only be 3 residency programs in the country in ophthalmology 1 year or something like that. So you can imagine these are fiercely competitive programs to get into. But the difference is, you know, I started out wanting to become this sort of James Herriot type, you know, jack of all trades, and very quickly got sort of closed down to being just a surgeon. And so I have this very tight focus, and there's whole wealth of general practice that I really know very little about, or remember, but not that much detail about general health care of animals. So, you know, you would come to, it's just like you and I, you know, if you need your appendix out, you're not going to your general practitioner. You're going to go find a surgeon, and you might find a specific surgeon, and that's how it's become in veterinary medicine, which again reflects, I think, the animal owning public's desire for the best quality of care. You know, there was a time when you'd go to your veterinarian, your general practice, and you say, oh, well, I have a go. You know, I've done one of these before. Those days are over. We want someone who's experienced, who's done thousands, and that's what we demand.
What are the typical type of surgeries you perform? I remember one dog in the book, I think it was Jacob, don't hold me to it, amputation of a leg. Tell the audience about the different type of surgeries you routinely perform.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I do probably something like 80% of what I do is orthopedic surgery. So that's, you know, hip replacements, cruciate ligament, Tom Brady knee surgery, and scoping joints, putting cameras inside joints, looking around, taking out chips and fragments and what have you. And there's a whole, and fractures and spinal surgery for dogs with slipped discs. So there's a whole lot of sort of orthopedic stuff, and then there's a whole lot of soft tissue stuff. One of the things that's nice about my job is that one day a week I'm the emergency surgeon, which means anything could happen.
Yeah.
You know, it could be just a straightforward broken leg. It could be some sort of heart-related surgery. You know, there's you know, your imagination can go anywhere, and skin grafts for dogs or whatever. So the variety is still there, and is also there at a very high level. There are certain places in the country that will do renal transplants. There are certain places in the country that will do open heart surgery. These are, you know, little niches that certain people get into. And the frequency of those cases is relatively low at this stage. One of the things that's coming along now is much more minimally invasive surgery, laparoscopic surgery, which we do at Angel as well. And you know, you're starting to think again, it's not driven by bikinis, it's driven by, this is what I would like, because less invasive means less discomfort and smaller incisions, and so things are changing. It's everything that we are looking for in ourselves is coming into veterinary medicine.
How do you deal with the unrealistic owner who wants you to save the animal, and you know that it's either not in the animal's best interest, or the likelihood is very high that the animal will not make it through the surgery?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, I guess I look at this in two ways. The first way is a sort of clinical objective way to try to present them with the odds, the data, the experience of what this animal may or may not have to go through, and whether you believe that is reasonable or not. And then you hope that they will come to you with that age-old question, what would you do if this were your animal? And if that's the case, and that's not always the case, but if it is, then I think you can draw upon your experiences, you know, and get subjective to say, this just isn't right. Because I think it comes down to the fact that we have a sense that dogs are stuck in the now, cats are stuck in the now. They don't have the ability to look at an amputation and chemotherapy is going to give me this much extra life. And so we have to say, as owners, responsible owners, I can justify doing this for some short-term discomfort, suffering, or whatever, because I've got a sufficient upside. My animal has got a great quality of life otherwise, that it is reasonable. And this is what gets difficult, because you know, what is reasonable for you may not be reasonable for me. And I think what we need to do is to be able to do a procedure knowing that if we only gained a small amount of time, how are we going to feel about this? You know, we're sort of battling with that fair weather friend denial, because we are wanting to say, are we doing this for the animal? Right. Are we doing this for ourselves?
Right.
And you know, there's so much I don't know about the owner that I'm speaking to. There's going to be all those personal experiences that they've had in their life. This may be their one true friend, like Mr. Hartman's example, that's left, the link animal to a lost husband or wife. They may have previous experiences with a disease that have been positive or negative, or friends who've had chemo and it was awful, or whatever. There's so much that's unsaid between us that it's not right for me to go into that. But I think if I can give them the veterinary version of what will happen to their animal, as well as potentially my own little take on it. And the danger of that is being wrong. And you know, one of the things I write about is where I've been fooled, because they're always out there. Yeah. They're the animals that you say, why am I doing this? And yet they keep going and have a fabulous life, and they slap you upside the head and say, hey, remember this one, buddy, because in the future, don't be so cold to write and quick to write this off.
Well, you talk about in your book the age factor, and you bring up this 15-year-old poodle named Noodle, who, you know, 15 years old, but
absolutely, absolutely. And you know, you're saying to yourself, this dog had essentially a terminal cancer as well, and yet lived for years and had a fabulous quality of life, and an owner who's going, that was the best thing I did. It was a tough decision, but I believed it to be the right thing. And I think those cases will always be out there. And then there's going to be the cases that you get into, perhaps even casually get into, believing this will go great, and it doesn't go great. I talk about a couple and a dog who had multiple surgeries over and over again, and spending a fortune. And it's sort of, you get so sucked into it, how do you get out of it?
That's right. When do you know to pull the plug and say, this isn't going to work?
That's right. And those are the worst cases, because you've already invested so much emotional and financial effort that you're saying, do I stop now? Is this the right thing to stop? And just cut my losses. And so, you know, this is part of what it's about. It's all those difficult decisions in between. I think, you know, with these animals in our lives for so long now, because we're doing such a better job, we are going to face those tough questions of how far do I go and how much is my pet worth? And they are, unfortunately, going to become more and more important as the years go by, as the decades go by, and more of an important part in what veterinary medicine in the future will be.
So what do you do with the person whose dog is everything to them? The dog may or may not be old, and the person comes into you sobbing. You know that you can fix it, or you believe that you can, but they lack the resources. That's got to be such a hard position.
Yeah, I mean, that's brutal. And I think that's going to become a more disturbing part of the future of veterinary medicine, because you know, there used to be this easy time whereby, you know, 30, 40 years ago, you take your animal with horrible arthritis, painful arthritis, miserable quality of life to a veterinarian, and he says to you, there's just nothing we can do. I'm going to put your dog to sleep. And you had the comfort as the owner of saying, I did the right thing, I consulted my vet, he told me what to do, because he's got nothing else to give me. And so you, as the owner, have given the vet the responsibility. These days, that's over, because I can say to you, we've got this medication, we've got these surgical options, and I have thrown the ball back in your court, and suddenly you face taking this on yourself, and to say, I've got to put a price on my dog. You know, you're telling me $5,000 to replace a hip. A surgery that works great would really make a huge difference in your quality of life, but it's $5,000. Can I do that? Is my dog worth this much to me? And my alternatives, you know, the cost of medical management over time could be very similar. And so I think, you know, one of the things that we're going to have to learn as a profession is to help owners with these tough choices. And you know, I seriously worry about, is veterinary medicine going to become first class and coach? Yeah. Because, you know, as a professional caring for animals, we want everyone to get those same opportunities. And you know, this brings up, of course, the issue of things like health insurance.
Pet insurance.
That's right.
I have it.
Right. And
you know?
And is that going to be the answer?
It's expensive.
It's expensive, and you know, it doesn't cover the entire cost, but it could make enough difference to justify some of the more expensive things. And my experience with people who've had pet insurance is generally they're quite satisfied that it's made enough of a difference. But not everyone's going to be able to afford pet insurance. And so, you know, these difficult issues just keep on coming up, and they're only going to get worse, because you know, we're going to keep on saying, hey, now we can do this for your dog. And yes, yet here's the price tag for it. And so, you know, it's just going to be the next level. Can I afford this? And, you know, I see a skewed population of the public. By definition, I see people who are coming to me armed to pay for what they want and believing their animal deserves it. But you're absolutely right. for the general practitioner, there are going to be a number of times where people say, I just cannot afford this. And I don't think you should feel, you're going to grieve and you're going to be sad about that, but there comes this point where you have to say, I got to pay the mortgage. I've got to put food on the table. Can I do all these things? And maybe what it's going to make us do is just reconsider, this is the new cost of an animal in our lives. Can we afford to have them?
Yeah, I wish that were true. I wish that people would, right at the beginning, understand the financial commitment, or maybe see pet insurance, because I would like to think there's a way that we can solve this problem, just like we need to solve it for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Something you talked about in your book that I think is an important message, painkillers now that can help arthritic dogs, something such as Rimadyl. Then there'll be a quick piece on the internet or on the TV, and everybody's worried, oh my God, I'm going to kill my dog if I continue to give this painkiller. So I wonder if you might comment on some of the anti-inflammatory medications. Sure.
Well, I mean, it's you can't watch the primetime television news and not see these ads, which it seems to me has almost become more disclaimer than actual benefit. I actually enjoy the fact that there's a new antiemetic to stop travel sickness in dogs. You can give it to prevent travel sickness in dogs, and its biggest side effect, well, one of its side effects is vomiting, which I thought was kind of funny. But with regard to the anti-inflammatories, yeah, they've come along, and they came along with FDA approval in the 90s, and this was the greatest gift for so many pet owners, and its involvement in the veterinary world sort of coincided with the growth of the internet, and when things started to go wrong for the first time, here was a place to vent about your pet having a problem. And in some instances, with animals dying, just as humans die from as basic things as aspirin and penicillin every year, some pets had problems with anti-inflammatories. And the bottom line here is, with all of the various anti-inflammatories, they've gone through very rigorous examination by the FDA. And one of the things that we talk about is that they all have something like 0.2% have complications. And so extremely low risk drug, 99.8% you're going to be absolutely fine. And those complications are going to be GI upsets or not feeling great off food, the kind of thing that we're now sufficiently tuned into to say, hey, I'm going to stop this and we'll try another one. You might prefer Tylenol, I might prefer Advil. It's the same thing we can do for dogs. And I think if an owner's uncomfortable having read something scary on the internet, and let's face it, there's a lot more scary stuff than there is good stuff, then we can find something else. And that's one of the nice things that's happened in the last couple of decades, is that we now have options. You don't have to feel tethered to one type of anti-inflammatory medication.
My dog Akuna died 2 years ago, but had spent the last, say, 4 years on Rimadyl, and it was changed from time to time to other anti-inflammatories, but had done very well with it. And somebody sent me one of the internet sites, do you want this to happen to your dog? And you see the dogs, and even I panicked, and I did just what you said. I called my vet and said, I'm concerned, I saw this, and they said, really, this dog has been fine for how long? And really it made the quality of his life so good.
Well, I think we do have these knee-jerk responses to those kind of stories, and naturally so. There's this great fear that it's easier to be taking something yourself than it is to be giving it to your pet, because you feel the responsibility of doing that. But I think you need to, when you do surf the internet looking for information, you've got to be careful about your sources. There's going to be personal stories and sad, tragic stories, and that's fine, and it's good to hear that. But there can come this point at which you can't do anything, and so try to find credible sources. I think there was someone actually did a sort of scientific review of databases from Yahoo and Google and what have you, looking at arthritis in dogs, and something like 75–77% of it was sort of dubious or at best sort of ill-intentioned or whatever. It wasn't great material, and so you just have to be careful where you get your sources from.
A good lesson to us all. I wonder if you would tell us about your own dog Patch and your guidance from Patch when you helped Mr. Hartman.
Yeah, Patch was my the first family dog, my dog growing up, a German Shepherd, and like so many German Shepherds, sadly, as the dog aged, 12, 13 years of age, became very weak on the back legs. This thing, what's called degenerative myelopathy, basically a neurological disease to the back legs. A sort of tragic thing to see, in that the head, the front legs, absolutely fine, sharp as a tack, back end weak, looks drunk, paralyzed, unable to go to the bathroom properly. And you know, my father and I sort of conspired to keep this dog alive. And if the dog had accidents in the house, I'd get them during school hours, you know, at lunchtime, and he'd sneak them at night. So we'd try and keep this quiet from my mother and my sister. And you know, what I learned here was, how far do you go? And you know, that one of the things I write about is the fact that, you know, my father called me up at school to tell him he just couldn't take it anymore, broke down in tears. He had to put the dog to sleep, and I left school and we buried the dog together. And like all teenage boys, sort of bit my lip and didn't cry but felt the pain. And you know, I look back on this that experience as a kid and see that we did the wrong thing. We kept this dog going for us. We didn't let this dog die with dignity. And to some extent, it has cemented my views on euthanasia, the ability at the right time to step in to alleviate pain without causing pain. You know, we think about, how do we want to live our life? How do we want to go? We want to have a fruitful life, and ideally, just go to sleep and we're done. And that's what we can offer with euthanasia. And it's a big responsibility, but what I was left with was the pain and guilt of the recollections of this dog and how it suffered, and no quality of life there, keeping a dog alive for our sake. And so, having been through that, you know, sometimes when people ask me, what would you do, I can pull that out of my memory and say, you know what, you don't want to be left with that recollection. Let's keep all the good stuff, and you know, be looking for what lets me know this dog is still my dog, doing those things that tells me all is well with the world. And if those things are still there, then great. But as they start to slip away, let's get in there before, you know, it goes too far. We've all had family members or friends who have withered away and suffered at the end. You know, we don't need to do that, you know, because I think part of our responsibility of pet owners is not only through all the good times, it's through the bad times. And again, it comes back to that taking on an animal, knowing there's going to be that time at the end. And I think we just have to step up at that point as well.
Invaluable advice to us all.
Taking the first step towards your legal career can be an overwhelming task at many other law schools. Lucky for you, the Massachusetts School of Law is not one of those schools. Applying is easy. No LSATs required. Scheduling is flexible with daytime and evening classes, and learning is remarkably rewarding since all of our professors have real-world experience. All of this and much more at the most affordable law school in New England.
The Massachusetts School of Law. Your future starts here.
Since we're going back in time, tell us about your decision to be an animal surgeon or to be a veterinarian. It was a great story.
Oh, yeah. You know, it was one of those things where my father was an obsessive James Herriot fan. You know, I used to watch the shows with him, and I got this sense I was being sort of indoctrinated, and as a teenage boy rebelled against that. And he just sort of said to me, why don't you go hang out for a day at our local practice? And so I did, and the vet I was there with, a guy called Ryan James, a wonderful guy, very much just sort of enjoyed involving me in the day's events. And you know, the climax really for me was being involved in a cesarean section birth of a dog, and literally being given this newborn puppy and told to resuscitate this animal. And just, you know, it wasn't Road to Damascus stuff, but it was the connection to this feeling of, wow, look at this career, look at this job. You know, one minute I am an orthopedic surgeon, one minute I'm in a field with a cow, you know, next minute I'm a dentist. There's so much variety, so much variation, and what a wonderful career this would be. And that was it for me, really. From that moment on, I said, this is what I wanted to do. And you know, it was hard to tell my father that. My parents live in the Yorkshire Dales. I mean, they live right in the heart of Heriot country, and I think I must be a huge disappointment to them in terms of not being that James Heriot type veterinarian. In fact, I met James Heriot when I was a teenager, but I also spent some time working as a student during my veterinary education in the Yorkshire Dales. I was trying to give it a chance, but it just wasn't working for me.
How did you end up here?
I ended up here because I decided that I wanted to do surgery. At the time, the European College of Veterinary Surgeons did not exist. It was not sort of so organized. American training programs were very respected and established, and I was just lucky enough to get accepted at Tufts to do that program, which is shared with Angel as well. So I was very fortunate, particularly for an American program, to take someone from overseas, and so I was thrilled to do that.
Well, we're very lucky to have you here.
Thank you.
I have a lab that I rescued from the streets, and I've been excusing his behavior for 10 years. He lives for food, you know, he inhales it. And then I read your book, and you said, you know, there's a problem, a big problem, like there is with people, obesity,
sure,
especially in dogs, and labs just love to eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the, you know, the problem with respect to obesity, and maybe even tell us about Wally.
Yeah, one of my problems is, you know, I have a Labrador, so you know, that's good for me as a vet because I can empathize with this oral fixation. I mean, these guys are just so food driven, and I think, you know, it's this fatal combination of the doe eyes and the stares and the you don't need all that food now, do you? And so, you know, when we feed our dog, you know, they wag their tails, they're grateful, it's this positive experience. Although, you know, you've obviously experienced this, you give your dog something to eat and they look at you and go, what was that? You know, it's so fast. But the other thing that happens is that our lifestyles are such that we get lazy. You know, they need exercise, they need to burn those calories. And if they are sitting with us on the couch watching TV, then whose fault is it that they're not exercising? And obesity has become a huge problem. It's 25 to 40% of cats and dogs are overweight or obese. And what's interesting, of course, is that all those things that we were worried about in terms of type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, arthritis, heart disease, all the things that you and I fear if we get overweight are what's happening to dogs. And so we are like this, pets are like this microcosm of our society, you know, that we are seeing all those issues. And it's, you know, now we have for dogs this drug called Slentrol, which is a oral appetite suppressant. it works very well to suppress even a Labrador's appetite. But,
I'm all ears.
But one of the things that you're looking at me, you haven't heard of this.
No, I haven't.
You haven't heard of this for a reason, because one of the marketing issues is, if it works so well for your dog, why can't I take it? And one of their biggest fears is people using it on themselves.
Oh my.
And so, I've met many clients who've used it and been thrilled with it. You have to then adjust diet and exercise and those kind of things, but it will even work for those challenging Labradors in your life. And the case of Wally was just the one about the veterinarian and his unusual technique there, which was he wanted to restrain his wayward dog. And his dog was a Jack Russell, which is, I have a Jack Russell as well. My Jack Russell didn't have that bad a problem of wanting to run off into the local neighborhood. But what he discovered was that obviously if you can get them to eat a little bit more and get a little heavier, you can ultimately slow them down. As it turned out, the dog started to decide to return home and not be such a wanderer, and he was the one left with the obesity problem.
Right.
But,
interesting story. My dog, I used to give him a biscuit every time. I have a fenced-in yard, and when he'd come in, I give him a biscuit. Well, he got so smart to figure, let's go in and out of the house.
Absolutely.
And my vet said, he's got to lose some weight. And I explained this problem. She says to me, well, give him a hug every time he comes in. Oh, yeah, sure.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that technique.
Do pet owners have too high an expectation about what you're ultimately going to be able to do to cure their pet?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the first thing that sometimes they can be frustrated by is our inability to diagnose the problem. I'll see owners come in from time to time who will just say something. I expect you to see what they're seeing and say, okay, tell me what it is. What's the problem here? And it comes down to that distinction between signs and symptoms that you and I go to our MD and we can express ourselves by saying, I get this pain right here on my knee at the end of my ski run, particularly if I do a mogul field. And you can, articulate exactly what is going on. Whereas I'm seeing a dog that might have some lameness at the end of exercise. Some exercises it may not happen, others it will. And so very confusing picture as to exactly what the problem is. And I think, this is where we spend more time with the animals perhaps than an MD can with a person or a child, in that we need to really get very hands-on. We need to interrogate to find out what's the story here. But on the flip side, our diagnostics may be less accurate because we don't know exactly where to go. So many of the animals in our lives love going to the vets. They smile, they want belly rubs, they're very happy to be examined, and they don't show that much discomfort. And so do I take an x-ray of a knee? Do I take an x-ray of an ankle? And suddenly the costs are starting to increase. And if I take that x-ray, is my dog going to just stand there for it or lay there for it? Probably not. We might need to add a sedative or a tranquilizer. Costs have gone up again. And so it's becoming increasingly, it's obvious there that it's becoming more complex for us to maybe find something because we don't get told where it hurts.
Right.
And I think, it amazes me. You can watch an episode of House and I don't think how much they're spending in diagnostics, and yet they can communicate typically with their patient, whereas I liken what veterinarians do to more of a sort of Sherlock Holmes approach. We've got to be methodical, we've got to be deductive, and the way I like to do it is to get the owner on the trail with me so that they understand why we're doing this test, what's the yield, what's the upside, what's the cost, and that's why we should start here, then we should go there. And so from time to time, owners will say, well, why can't you just tell me what it is? And I can't do that. But for the most part, when you put it in that context, they sort of go, hey, this isn't an easy job. I can see, you know, why you're going to have to do what you do. And for what I do, because it's referral work, they've already found frustration or just not getting to the answer yet. So they're already got a different mindset.
Well, we're out of time, and I'm sorry about that, because I think I could talk with you for hours. I want you to know that the next time the phone rings, how much we appreciate all you do and all you give up to do the work that you do. And we're all grateful to you for spending this time with us. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so much.